Yo, what's up, y'all? It's your boy Z-Dougie, and in this video we are going to be going over my basic template for writing bass music and getting it wrapped up quickly. So let's go ahead and hop into it. So I want to start off by saying that this is just a template. This is by no means restrictions or rules or anything like that. A lot of the stuff in here I may not use on every single project, but I use it enough to where I'd rather have it in there set up and I can just delete it if I don't want to use it than have to set it up if I decide to. So it's all about workflow and just getting ideas out and making them sound good as fast as possible. And so, yeah, let's start from the top. So these two up here that I have are ghost triggers for a sidechain. So we're going to get into the sidechain and routing after we explain all of the groups and how I lay all of that out. So under that, we have drums. This is groups within groups. There is snares and kicks. Now, on all of my groups, I use pretty much a compressor and an EQ on everything at some point. So I have snare compressor with some saturation, glue compressor. This isn't really doing anything. These are just here for when I want to dial back. So the EQ, and then same deal on the kicks, just no saturator. Don't have anything on the tracks. I like to just try and pick. I do have an EQ here for a reverse snare sweep. That I never really want the lows for, so I know I'm going to want that. So if you see an EQ on a track or something, that's because generally I know that I'm going to cut out the lows or the highs or whatever, so I already have the EQ there. If I end up not using it, again, I just delete it, and that's faster than having to set it up. Snares, kicks, and those are within my drums group where I have just 5% of a preset from the drum bus, which is punchy driven. After that, we have hats. So this is all of my hi-hats. I have a spot for an open hat, my hat MIDI, my hat loops if I use audio, and then I have a group down here for hat fills, which is just like quick little, I'll show you an example, just like these right here. Those are what I would put in this group, and I like to separate those because I usually compress them more than my actual main hi-hats. So on the hats group, I have my OTT, which is just a preset for multiband compressor, and then this is a bit warmer, which is a saturator preset. The percentages on these may change, but I have the output down on the saturator for most of these. You'll see it's at 6.9. That's because I like to just, have a little giggle myself. You might see a lot of 6.9s or 420s in my volumes and presets and stuff, just because it's fun. I have this Lucid multiband preset. Now, this is from way, way back when Lucid helped me out with mixing and mastering some songs before I ever knew how to write a decent tune. But I've kept this on in my projects in certain spots, and now it can be yours. It's really not doing much unless you push the sound into the compressor and then play around with the ratios. But at the very least, it can be, like a utility, and you can kind of multiband EQ the volumes. And then I have a glue compressor and an EQ. So I pretty much end all of my chains or groups with a glue compressor and an EQ. I just like to tap things down and clean them up if I need to. Of course, I would, depending on what goes in these, add points and, you can't see. I would add points and EQ however I need, but these are just basic EQs to be placeholders and kind of do the for sure stuff. I never really need below 100 hertz in my hi-hats, but you never know. And if you don't need it, then just delete it. One more thing I wanted to point out is the certain things in Ableton have like oversampling or higher quality settings, and one of those things is the saturator. Right here I have the high quality checked, and on the glue compressor I have oversampling checked. I'm pretty sure that is on all of those instances in the project because I saved that as my defaults for those effects, And so every time I put it in a project, even just out of my Ableton library, then it already has those checked. But that is not standard, so you have to go save that as your default if you want that. Now, if this project or template is too much for your computer, or too heavy on the CPU or anything, you can turn those off, get rid of some of these effects, get rid of some of the EQs. You can even turn off the analyzer, or I'll have to move myself again. You can turn off the analyzer right here below me. This is like your spectrum analyzer for your EQ, and it does use CPU, so you can totally turn that off if you're not using it and save the CPU. So yeah, that is the chain on the hats, and then below that we have vocals. Now vocals, I have just a little bit of OTT, this speech enhancer preset from multiband, and then a saturator if I want to use it, and then an EQ. Now I totally forgot to put a glue compressor here, so you can do that if you need to, but yeah, I definitely compress your vocals and everything. There's plenty going on over here, but I like to tap it down at the end, same as everything. So my bad that is not in the project, but I would put it right here after the saturator. All right, and so inside of the vocal chain, we have a vocal recording track. I do record some of my own vocals sometimes, or samples or stuff like that, so I just have a track that I kind of have set aside to record into if I want, and then I have just 2 audio tracks. All right, moving on. After the vocals, we have sub. Now I just have some basic sine presets from the hip hop sub bass. I guess this is saved from when it used to be called that, but now it's just called basic sine sub or something like that. And then I have a sampler here for if I want to use 808s. Below that, we have drum fills. I have 2 multiband compressors. I just think it sounds good on mid-range drums, tom fills, breaks, stuff like that. A saturator if I'm going to use it, or if I need to use it, and then a glue compressor and an EQ. And then 2 tracks just because I usually use more than one, and I might even duplicate those depending on the style of song I'm writing. Synths. Now for the synths, we have a spot for serum. Now I didn't put these in here, or I didn't put serum in here because some people may not have it. If you end up going to get the project for my Patreon, then you can just put your own instance of serum, or it won't give you any trouble if you don't have it. We have a spot for serum, and then below that we have a spot for Vital. Now I did put Vital in the project because that is a free plugin, and if you don't have it, then you should be annoyed every time you open this template to go download Vital because it's free and it's awesome. Below that we have Sample. This is a spot to just drop any audio or any loop or whatever in there. So we've got a spot for Serum, Vital, and Sample. Those are pretty much the things I use the most. And on the chain, we have OTT, saturator, another saturator, glue compression, and an EQ. Now, this may seem aggressive or not aggressive at all, depending on your style, but this is just a starting point so that I already kind of know what my synths are going to sound like, getting pushed through some compression and distortion, and just making sure that there's no lows, because I'd pretty much always use a sub. Yeah, I typically have a sub follow my synths, or I just use a big old fat 808. And if you ever need something to not have that EQ applied on it, you can either just delete this and EQ on the tracks, or depend on these, or you can just move whatever that one track is outside of the group and process it a little differently. But generally, I don't need the lows, so that is cut out of the synths as well. And then after that, we have other drums. Now this is for crash, clap, crowd clap, ride, shakers, anything else you can think of that's like high-end percussion or top loop stuff that is not a hi-hat, a kick, or a snare, or straight up drum loops, or drum fills. On that, I have a little bit of OTT, saturator, multiband compression, a glue compressor, and then EQ. Same as you'll notice the patterns. I have a pretty similar thing going on all of these. So below this is chants. So chants is just like your A's and Hay's and 1, 2, 3s and stuff like that, your vocals in the background. So I have an OTT, a saturator, a speech enhancer, again, like what was on the vocals up here. Again, that's a multi-band preset in Ableton, a glue compressor, and an EQ. And then those are just empty tracks. Below that is sound effects. So here are, again, OTT, saturator, glue compressor, EQ. Same thing you've seen the whole time. In that, I pretty much use, this is like some of the most common sound effects that I might use: a turntable, glass, a scratch, text, gun click, and a zap. So all of those are pretty common, just as little sound effects in my songs, so I just went ahead and labeled them and have them there. Again, as always, if you don't use it, just delete it. Below that, we have all effects. Now I have this separated into 2 groups within a group. Now the top ones up here is effects. This is like texture and sweeps and noise and stuff like that. I have an EQ where it's taking out the lows, as well as the OTT, saturator, glue compressor. But the difference is on this impacts, and again, should be a glue compressor right here. But I guess I really don't do too much compression. I usually don't even use this OTT here on impacts, because this is like big sub bombs and crashes and stuff with low end that you might use for like a transitional effect. Not really necessary, but if I were going to put it there, use it, then it would go right there after the saturator. So something you'll notice is a pattern, definitely, that I compress, distort, back and forth, back and forth. It's happening all throughout the project, because now we'll get into the routing. There is another layer of compression and saturation happening that all of these are getting bussed to. Maybe not all of them though. So we'll start at the top again. I have my drums, my hats, and my vocals are all going straight to the master down here, main. They're all going straight to the master. With that in mind, they skip all minus sub and all. These are my bus tracks. And so for all minus sub, we're doing just a little bit more compression and saturation on everything except for these top 4 things. So the sub, the vocals, the hats, and the drums, none of those are hitting this all minus sub. Now this is a multi-band compressor, 15%, nothing crazy, a bit warmer like we've seen throughout the project, glue compressor, and then an EQ. All of these things, drum fills, synths, other drums, chants, sound effects, and all effects, are all meeting up on all minus sub. And so here, all of those things get a little bit more compression and saturation all together, and then gets sent to all, where all of these things, drum fills through all effects, join the sub, and the sub meets them here on all. So all minus sub right here is getting sent to all, and then the all is getting sent to the master, where all of these things, sub through all effects, are meeting up with the drums, the hats, and the vocals. And that's where the master chain is actually going to take place. And so on all minus sub, we're doing a little bit more compression and distortion, and just making sure it's a little fatter but still tamed for drum fills through all effects. And then all of these things are meeting the sub on all, and we do a little bit more glue compression. We have an EQ here that it's on mid-side EQ. If you see this, it looking like this on some of the other groups, this is on mid-side mode, and that's where you can EQ your mono signal and your stereo signal separately. And so I have nothing happening on the mono signal or the mid signal, but on my sides, you just click this button right here and it'll pop up. Sides, I'm cutting out everything that is below 100 hertz. I never really use much side information in there, but again, as always, just delete it if it goes against what you're doing in the song. These are all just guidelines to get ideas out faster and cleaner, but if something gets in the way, delete it. So if you want a big old wide sub bass or have a big wide effect in the low end, then you can totally just turn this off. And EQ however you need. And then we have our compression or our sidechain happening right after that on all of those things that are meeting up there. And so the sidechain is getting triggered by these two operator instances up here. I have a kick sidechain and I have a snare sidechain. That's just to visually be able to keep them separate and know where I'm at when I'm setting those up. So just wherever my kicks and snares land in the project, whatever kind of song I write, I just take one of these. And now these are a little longer than I use. I'll typically cut them like way down, but they're just a little bigger so that you can find them easier and then you can edit them all later. But this right here, if you go down to all, then you'll see that kick sidechain is getting triggered. So I have these set up to receive information from each one of these tracks, and you can set the release however you need, if you want a longer release or a shorter release, or you can adjust the size of the clip as well, because all these are muted noise coming out of operator. So it's just like a brick wall of noise that triggers that side chain. And I leave it in MIDI so that if you end up having a bunch of them or laying the pattern out and you want to make it shorter or longer or whatever, you can just consolidate the MIDI clip and adjust all of them in a couple of clicks instead of having a bunch of audio chain triggers, which there's ways to do that as well, but it's just my workflow. There's a million different ways to do everything. So if something is a little different and you like your way of doing it, then totally use the bones of whatever or steal ideas and set up your own template and make it work. Make it work for you. So that's the routing of the project. Now, the reasoning behind the routing and the way that I do things is I personally think that vocals and hi-hats just sound better not being sidechained. Drums, of course, your kick and your snare are coming through the mix and they're the driving force, but I think hi-hats and vocals most of the time, they just sound better without being sidechained. If you need a little bit of sidechain or you want a little, add some or all of it, then you can just copy and paste these two sidechains right here and you could go put that on the group and it'll just pick up those ghost chains all the same. That's just a personal preference. I think vocals and hi-hats sound better going straight to master, and then of course the kick and snare go to master. It just makes sense to me. If you want to change the routing up or do the buses a little different, however you need, but this has worked well for me for years just to write stuff really, really quickly. A couple more things to go over. I do have some sends and returns down here. I have a long verb, which is just using a reverb with like a 2-second delay, and then it's EQ'd to where it's 350 hertz to 5K hertz, and so it's really just like a background reverb. And then I have a short reverb that has a little bit more space if you compare those two. A little bit more space to breathe, but it only happens for half a second or 500 milliseconds. And so this is going to be a little bit brighter and lower, but it's only happening for half a second. And these are, again, sends or return tracks, I mean. And so since I'm going to typically apply these to my synths or other drums or chants or effects and stuff like that, then I'm going to want to sidechain this reverb signal as well so that it doesn't muddy up my drums and hats and vocals. I always want those to be the cleanest thing in my mix. And so the reverbs can happen in the background and they can get sidechained and they just kind of fill the space in between. This isn't going to be an overbearing effect. It's really just to fill in the gaps so that it's never really too dry or too silent. But if you notice, I don't have a lot of reverb, or if you listen to my music, I really don't use a ton of reverb in my stuff, but I always have this return track of a short and a long reverb. Sometimes I might even pan them out separately from each other just to get some more space, and that can be a really nice effect as well. Below that, I have a long reverb and a short reverb for my vocals. So that would just be for my main vocal track, and I would add those in as needed, and also a slap delay. So this is like 30 milliseconds on the left and 15 milliseconds on the right, very very fast, and it just adds kind of like a robotic like slap delay, a little metallic sound to vocals, but I just mix it in slightly. I may change these times, but overall it can be a really nice widening effect, or just kind of add a little bit more depth and of interesting effect to a vocal. All right. And so moving on, let's explain kind of the goal in mind here for how I master and what I'm working towards. We're not going to go over a master chain or anything in this. This is just kind of how we get there, how we get an idea wrapped up on the writing side and it sound decent, and then we'll do something else for mixing and mastering. But so we're trying to hit -5 or 6 on the master, and so that we have plenty of room to push that. You'll notice there's a volume decrease on all of the groups and pretty much all of the tracks as well. Now it sort of correlates to how I might mix or the types of samples I usually use, but it's definitely not perfect, so you'll have to adjust these levels. Again, these are not restrictions or rules. This is just general stuff. These are assumptions, estimations of what I might need to speed stuff up. So just to make sure that I don't clip, then I already have the groups turned down like -2.5, and I have a lot of the tracks like -5 to 15 or so. And now we do have a bunch of OTT and stuff on a lot of these groups, so that volume will get made up a decent bit, and you'll need to start glue compressing after that. So it's all about working in stages. So we're making sure nothing's crazy loud or clipping in a bad way out of the track or even the sample. And then we are glue compressing. We're just tapping down. So all of these groups where we're using the glue compressor on almost everything, I never really have this pushing past 5. And you'll notice this is also, all of them are at 50%. It's only half of the signal is getting tapped down by this glue compressor. We're making sure nothing's clipping in a bad way coming out of the tracks going into the group, and then we're compressing, distorting, and then we're just tapping down the peaks. So all the highest stuff, we're just compressing it a little bit, squishing it, taming it a little bit to make the effects later on have an easier time. And so all of these groups get tapped down and have a little bit of a volume decrease going into these groups, where they then further compress, distort, and then get tapped down again. So again, we'll just pull this threshold down. If we had a project here, then we would just pull this threshold down and we wouldn't really go past 5. And it's only at 50% on all of these. So it's not really fully squashing signals. It still lets some of it through, but we're just trying to keep it tame throughout the process. We're doing a little bit of glue compression on all of the groups, and then we're doing it on the bus, and then we're doing it again on this bus, and then we're going to definitely have some more compression on the master and everything. But again, all of that is just in attempts to keep a project fat but tamed and ending up around -5 or 6, and that's typically where I master from. It's all preference, and 5 or 6 works for me. So with all of that explained, we'll take a quick look at what I left on the master. There is one more plugin that's free that I left on here. That's Span. So I do recommend going and getting Voxingo Span if you can, and or a similar product. Just have a frequency analyzer on your master, and if you have a second monitor, I recommend just keeping the analyzer up and always watching as you're working, especially if it has a mid-side mode. Then you can watch your stereo field a little bit as well and really keep things in check as you move along. And then So I keep that at the end, so even after I start to add a master chain and everything, I'll keep that span on there so that I can keep a watch on things. One more quick tip, I have a utility on here. Now, I don't know if this will transfer or not in the template if you go get it from the Patreon, but you can Control K and it will open up your edit key map, and you can see I have the key M tied to the mono button for this utility, which is on the master. And so Control K again will take us out of that. And if I just press the key M, then you'll see it triggers that mono. And so at any point in my process of writing, I can always just click M, and then I can check that sound in mono and make sure that it's not too wide or only mono or whatever you might be checking out. You can test. And then I've got a limiter on there. So yeah, that is basically it. That is the main setup for how I write songs really fast. I've been able to push full ideas out in 2 or 3 hours and have them decently mixed. And once you get the hang of mixing and mastering and build your own process, that's really the easy part and doesn't take more than 10, 15, 20 minutes to get something decent. And so this should be a good starting point. If you don't know where to start, or you're not really sure how to approach finalizing a song, or what you're shooting for, what you're thinking about while you're working, then hopefully this kind of gives some insight of what to keep in mind as you're writing, but not having too many restrictions or sticking to things too hard. These are all just suggestions, and they work really well for me, so I hope they work well for you too. And one more thing is you can, again, grab this from my Patreon. It is in my shop. So this is what it looks like if you're a paid member. You can see the Ableton 12 template is $5 if you're not a member, but if you sign up for any of my tiers, which start at $5, then you can go ahead and download the template. And so you'll get extra unreleased tunes, and I'll be uploading early stuff, or like this upcoming weekend, I'm releasing a VIP that will never be released anywhere else. So it'll be a Patreon exclusive. So if you like my music, then definitely go check that out. And if you want the template, then you're already spending $5 anyways. You might as well sign up for a month and snag a song or two. Beyond that, you'll have more tutorials and access to sample packs and stuff like that on the $10. On the $20, you get access to my serum pack. And then if anybody wants to tell me to flip a song, then you can do that as well. That's limited to one person a month. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I hope you learned something. I hope it helps a bunch, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.